I prepared, with Mark Richardson's assistance and Bob Reeves' assistance, a document called a Petition for Reconsideration. The Petition for Reconsideration challenged the FDA final rule on regulatory grounds and scientific grounds. And if I can go into a discussion about that, FDA's final rule relied primarily on principles of risk assessment. It established it relied on the 1993 EPA reference dose. Again, it's expressed as a concentration in air of 0.5 micrograms per cubic meter. It also relied on the ATSDR minimum risk level, which is another name for a reference dose. Doesn't this all get complicated? ATSDR stands for Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, another United States federal agency. The MRL published by ATSDR for mercury was 0.3 micrograms per cubic meter. Boy, that's really technical. We were advocating a reference dose much lower, the one published by Richardson, 0.06 micrograms per cubic meter. But in the meantime, came to the conclusion that we could use the EPA figure and the ATSDR figure and still show that 48 million people in this country were at risk. How did we do that? Well, it's a long and sordid tale. We found 27 propositions of error, and I mean big errors, in the FDA's final rule. And what we found was that in a very biased and unabashed way, FDA had very unfairly attempted to push the reference dose, the actual absorbed dose by any given person that is characterized and defined as safe, higher, while artificially lowering their assessment of exposure. So there are two things going on here. We have a reference dose that is defined as safe, and if FDA is going to make its argument, it has to show that the level of that reference dose is actually above the actual exposure that dental patients are receiving. In fact, if you do this thing properly, we can show that huge subpopulations, I'll get it out in a minute, subpopulations in this country are actually receiving far more than a legitimate reference dose. And so those are the challenges that we made. And some of these criticisms of the final rule are nothing more than mistakes. For example, FDA told us earlier in their paper that we absorb 80% of the mercury that we inhale into our lungs. We completely agree with that. But when they were assessing the level of the reference dose, they assumed 100% absorption. What did that do? It drove the reference dose, the safe dose, up improvidently. It should have been lower because you've got a factor of 0.8 in to lower it because that's the actual absorbed dose. Was that an accident? I think FDA would have to tell us that. I don't think it was. Every time they made a mistake, they erred on the side of making the reference dose higher and the exposure level lower.